We were asked to respond with three questions. The first of which, who should lead on creating curricular change? Now, given the environmental, social and moral imperatives imposed by the climate and biodiversity crises, you'd really think that curricular change would occur spontaneously because of it being deeply uncomfortable not to respond to such crises. However, I'll start by saying that the status quo is always going to be an overly comfortable place and people gravitate to it. The second point, obviously, is that can no longer be acceptable. And we need to develop frameworks for change in architectural education in the short term, which significantly better equip graduates to design for zero carbon futures. The RIBA has been extremely proactive in developing multiple initiatives. The way ahead is a framework overtly linking standards for practice and education. This has not been done before. We have the development of 4 mandatory competencies in life safety, climate literacy, ethical practice, and research literacy, all of which are going to be requirements for our chartered members in the future, and which will be tested and evaluated in the post-registration period. The RIBA 2030 Climate Challenge sets targets for practice. The RIBA Sustainable Outcomes Guide develops support for achieving those targets. And finally, Themes and Values for Education is the new validation framework defining graduate attributes in respect of zero carbon design skills and a host of many other things which are essential to becoming a functioning, ethical and resource efficient architect. Second question was, how do we plan to reframe higher education training? Well, as I said, we've completely rewritten our validation procedures. These will be mandatory for all 110 validated schools from the 1st of September of this year. Themes and values for architectural education means that graduates are required to understand the environmental physics of a properly resource efficient architecture, demonstrate, an important word, skills for zero carbon design, and reflect the ethos and practical guidelines of the Sustainable Outcomes Guides. These skill sets in graduates will influence the culture of professional practices and reinforced by the imperatives that all our chartered members, to repeat, must meet the emergent mandatory competencies. And what's our specific plan for doing all this? Well, firstly, the new validation framework will apply to all RIBA visits from 1st of September this year, ensuring that schools have practical strategies in place to teach climate literacy, reflected in learning outcomes at parts 1, 2, and 3, and the relationship of the latter, part 3, to mandatory CPD for RIBA members. By autumn of this year, there will be an online provision of teaching material on RIBA Academy, developing the savoir-faire and savoir-être that Gavin eloquently outlined in respect of climate literacy, and reflecting the different career stages of architects from undergraduate student to seasoned practitioner. And by the spring of 2022, we will have extended the eligibility criteria for chartered practices to reflect the immediate need for members to upskill and demonstrate that they meet these mandatory competencies, including, as I said, where appropriate, the testing of those skills post-registration. Thank you.